Okay, so we're going to get started in just a second here. I think we're all set with the cameras. Great. So the first thing we're going to do today, well, first let's do some introductions. My name is RJ. This is Rob, and we'll be the teaching fellows for S76 this year. And these labs are meant to be a time for more hands-on exercises where we'll give some instructions, we'll break up into groups kind of like this, work through them, then we'll be floating around to help out, and then we'll go over an example solution or take example solutions from the group.
Yeah, if you ever have any questions, you can raise your hand, and one of us, even if like RJ's talking, I can come over and help whenever. So
yeah,
feel free.
Especially in these early labs where we'll be doing a bit of software setup. Just getting everyone's configuration on the same page is the most important thing. So definitely raise your hand if something doesn't seem to be quite the same as it is up here, or something doesn't seem to be quite working. If you got my email a little while ago, there's a link in there. If you haven't installed XAMPP, you can click the link in there and install XAMPP. That's the first thing we're going to do, is just download that software, get it installed, and try to put an example HTML file in your sites folder and get that to load. So anything you put in that file, and pull it up. Who here has installed XAMPP? Has successfully installed XAMPP. Oh, great. Okay. Who has not? No,
or other web server.
Or anything.
Is there anyone who does not have something currently working or in the process of installing it?
Yeah. So we'll get that set up. And then for those that have installed it, have you been able to put a file in your sites folder to try things out? If not, let's open up your favorite text editor and save a file in your sites folder. Okay, so everyone who's gotten everything set up, we're going to keep pushing ahead. For those that have not gotten things fully set up, just raise your hand, and David's floating around to help out as well. So the next thing we're going to do is you should have at least a basic index.html or test.html or the lectures examples in that folder. We're going to take one of those files and make it a little more usable. So we're going to add the meta tag in the head, as we saw in lecture, and add a viewport element to that, a viewport property to that. In addition, we're going to add some script tags and add some JavaScript to make it a little more dynamic. So I want you guys to make a page that has, at the very least, a text box and a button, a submit button, and a div of some sort with an ID. And so feel free to collaborate with your group. But the goal is when you click the submit button, whatever's in that text box populates that div. So Rob's going to draw a picture. Is that what Rob's doing?
Okay. All right. What did you say?
A button.
And then that just
right. So the goal is whatever you type. First, set up the HTML such that it has this text box, the submit button, and then some space below.
And it can be invisible space. Like if you just have a div, you're not going to be able to see it, but it'll be there. And then whatever you type here and hit submit, it should show up down here.
So once you have the structure of your HTML set up, you'll need two things. At the very least, a script tag that includes JavaScript, and you'll likely have a script tag that includes jQuery, as we saw in lecture. So if you don't remember exactly how to do that, feel free to collaborate with your partners, look on the course's website, or raise your hand and we'll be floating around. But the goal is to, again, once you click that submit button, have the contents reflected in the div below.
Just to point something out, this little line right here is what I'm using to include jQuery. So if you wanted, you could just download jQuery locally and then include it with like script source equals jQuery.js or whatever, if it were inside of the same directory as this exercise1.html. Here, Google happens to provide a jQuery link online, so I'm just directly linking to Google and pulling down jQuery that way. So either works. Okay, so a couple things I've added just to get you going if you're stuck. So notice I've given some IDs to my div and my form and my input text box, because jQuery is going to conveniently, some of them didn't really need IDs, but it is convenient to have them. Because jQuery, remember this syntax is going to let me $, parentheses, and then hashtag or pound, whatever, is going to refer to the element with that ID. I wasn't very creative with my ID names, so we have exercise 1 form, exercise 1 text, and exercise 1, that shouldn't be ID. Div. Okay, and so what this particular line of jQuery is saying is select this particular item. So we're selecting the item with ID exercise 1 form, which is this guy. There should only be one thing in your entire document with that ID. And so that's this guy. And we're saying when the submit event is triggered, so when we actually hit submit on that form, we're going to run this function. So I haven't defined what the function does yet, but we're going to want the function to do something like copy this text down into this div and also make sure that the form doesn't actually end up submitting. So let's actually talk about the third point first. We saw this in lecture. How do we prevent the form from actually submitting? What do we need to do? Yes. So we can do that just by return false. If we return true, that means the form should actually submit. And this is going to be useful for things like validating the submission, because like if you didn't fill out a text box, maybe you don't want the form to submit. So return false will prevent that. But if it is filled out, then you do want it to submit, so you can return true. And for points 1 and 2, I'm going to use jQuery. You can use regular straight JavaScript. But what is the selector? And this being the selector, this jQuery selector, what is the selector I'm going to want to use in order to get something from this? Yeah, this is the selector. So remember that the pound, the hash, the whatever you want to call it, refers to the element with that ID. If I said this, that would mean the element with that tag, which there isn't any. You might see that if I did something like div, or if I did, actually div would be pretty good. I'll show that in a second. And we don't want that from form. We want it from exercise 1 text. So the text is inside of this input box, exercise 1 text. I gave it that ID. Just get the text. So this is we have now selected the item. And this is where you kind of just learn them, or you can go through the jQuery documentation. But what we're going to want to do to actually get the text that's inside that text box is .val. And so then I can store that in just a variable. Var text equals blah. OK, so the line I just added, I wrapped that around everything we had so far inside of this script tag, is another jQuery thing. So you'll notice, and there are some shortcuts you might know. So like .submit also exists, but I'm not going to use those. So whenever you see .on, that refers to like something should happen when this event happens. So submit is one event that happens whenever you like submit a form. So ready is another event that happens whenever that thing has been fully loaded on the page. And so here we're saying when the entire page has been loaded, do this. So without this line, then we are doing this function before we've even gotten to the HTML that causes these things to exist. So when the page fully loads, then do this stuff. And this is a very common pattern that you don't want to do things until the page is loaded.
Is there a danger if you put it at the end of the body?
No. Well, no. You can do that. The thing is that like eventually this will probably get put into like, or should probably be put in a separate JavaScript file, which you could include at the bottom, but I usually see like all these script tags up top. Yeah, so the .ready function is an alternative to this. Sure. And we'll do the last point now. We insert the text into the div. So what selector am I going to want to use? It's exactly this guy, hash exercise1 div. And then we're going to want to put inside of it whatever was in that text box. And so you can look at the various jQuery methods that are available to you. Here I happen to know that I want to use the text method, which is kind of confusing because I called this variable text. So let's say this is text box. So we're using the text method and calling putting inside of it text box. So this line is saying that take this div, replace whatever is inside it with whatever is in this variable.
And after the labs, we'll definitely post our example solutions with extensive comments, similar to this, but with a little bit more explanation.
Yeah.
So you can so that if you missed a bit or don't quite understand what one line does, that you can see it after the lab is over. So I'll get us started on the second part of this, but it extends on this. So if you haven't fully gotten this working, definitely flag us down. We'll help get it working. But the second part is going to tease a bit behind the mechanics of the project. So we'll look at, if you go to cs76.net, there's a projects tab on the left, and there's the link for our first project, which is due approximately 2 weeks hence. Yeah, project, that got attention. As part of the project, there's a section labeled, let me get the name right, geocoding, and there's a link to Google's geocoding API. So through jQuery, and the project gives a bit of a hint on how to do this with the getJSON function, you're able to make external requests, asking for information from an external API, like the geocoding API. In this instance, the geocoding API allows you to turn addresses or zip codes into, or get more information about them. So we're going to extend this example to change, instead of changing text, when you type in a zip code, we'll want you to send that zip code through the geocoding API and get back the city and state for that zip code. So as a first test, go to the link on cs76.net, go to the projects tab, click the projects link, and there's a link to the geocoding API. Look at the example there and try it out just by going to the URL at the geocoding API. And definitely talk with people at your table to see if you can't seem to find the page I'm talking about. Then you're going to want to modify this to make your submit box send a request to this geocoding API with jQuery's getJSON function. So I'll float around to help get this, or exercise 1 working, which was up there a second ago, and then we can push ahead on this second example.
Okay, so once again, I'm going to use jQuery for this, although you can use straight JavaScript. But as you saw in lecture, that when you start making AJAX requests, where jQuery becomes like a single line of stuff, JavaScript tends to be like a whole bunch of ifs, elses, and making sure it works for Internet Explorer and all that stuff. So jQuery makes this stuff nice. And so you could look through the jQuery documentation looking for the appropriate functions. In the spec, we give you the hint that you can use getJSON. And so just Googling for that, I get this guy. It will also reference the fact that this is shorthand for the .ajax function. So jQuery also provides an AJAX function, which is like a very general AJAX, can do anything you want. But it has some shorthand functions like getJSON and .get and .post that fill in some default parameters for you. So here we're going to use getJSON. And so if we look here, we need to figure out the URL, the data, And success we'll get to in a second, but that's going to be a function that will handle whatever the response from that AJAX request was. So first, you need to figure out what the URL is going to be.
I want to show the like jQuery's example.json.
Where's their
Down,
example?
just like right there.
This guy? Well, that's making a request to.
Yeah, but there's a URL and there's a function for data
Okay.
URL.
So the jQuery documentation, if you look at it, it's going to give you a bunch of examples for these functions. Here, their example, so $, whenever you see the $, you immediately know jQuery. So $.getJSON, and then this is the URL they're giving it, and this just happens to mean that, like, if you had a file in your, like, if you had a file inside a folder AJAX called test.json, you could do this. Unfortunately, you don't, or well, you could create one if you wanted. But you can also include here links to like http:// Google something. So any type of URL can go in there. And then here is an example of a success function where the function takes one argument. It can take more, but here we're only going to need to take one argument, data, which is the data that the server returned. And so then inside of this function, we can do stuff with that data. And so in our example, the URL is going to be something with the geocoding API, and the data that it's going to return is hopefully something in which we can find the city and state. Okay, so this is an example URL. This will only currently work for Cambridge MA, so we're going to want to programmatically replace this with zip code. And I guess I'll just do that now because that's simple. So how do we do that? It's just plus zip code. So in JavaScript, you can concatenate strings like this. So to insert zip code just into the middle of the string, we can do this. Yeah.
Do you have to change the address bit with the postal code here? Or
Is looking here. One sec. So
Well, just give it a try. And go to the URL, see if it works.
well, now I don't even. Hold on.
Hit escape and then comma M.
You
Oh my God.
don't have the same
Hit escape.
Vim
Comma
binding-
M.
Comma M.
There you go.
Nice.
Okay, so
Go for it.
yeah, so here's an example of using the geocoding API. If we go to the URL maps.googleapis.com/maps/api/geocode/JSON question mark address equals 02138, you hit enter. This is what we get back. There's all sorts of data here. There's something called results. Inside of results, something called address components, and a long name and a short name, and all of this data is what you'll get back if you do jQuery's getJSON function and give it this URL. And then you can access this data by using JavaScript. You'll get it back as an object. So you can do data.results would be the first thing, and that gives you access to all of these, everything inside the results. Data.results.address components will give you access to the address components. And so you may want to try just doing, without passing the zip code or taking Rob's example code here and seeing if you can console.log or alert data.results, which will come back as an array or an object. But see if you can get the getJSON working without worrying too much about what you do with the data. Just get it working to the point where you are sending a request to Google and you're getting something back and you know that part is working.
Yeah, it's very common in this, like, once you start dealing with AJAX requests and things, like, set up the call. Don't set up what you actually want to do with the data yet. Just log to make sure the data got there. Because if it didn't get there, then everything else you're doing isn't going to work yet. And if in Chrome, you should get very familiar with, well, I get to it by going here, but there are other ways to open this.
Yeah.
This little console tab down here. So in this console tab, you can just type regular JavaScript, or whatever you console.log in your JavaScript files will appear down here. I can show that pretty readily.
Yeah. And for those that just missed how we got there, you right-click and click Inspect Element, and then click the Console tab, or in the View bar, click View. Click View.
So that's
In the View bar, it's Developer, JavaScript console. That's the other way to get this console to come up. And from here, you can type in JavaScript and
So you can type in any JavaScript you want in here. So I could do like, I happen to have jQuery already loaded, which means I can also type jQuery down here. So body dot, what is it, CSS. Background color, red. It's not CSS. It is style. I have no idea what it is.
what is CSS?
What is the
I don't know.
background color? Boom. So you can interactively play with your page in this little JavaScript console to test out what things do.
Yeah, and that's handy for testing out a one-line jQuery function or something, just to make sure you know that you're putting the right line in your code instead of worrying about trying to figure out which line isn't working.
Yeah, and this is also where X-Rise 2, and so this is where, like, if I insert console.log ready here. So this is a very frequent thing that I do where, like, when the document loads, this function should be called, and so I console.log to actually verify that it is called. And so if we reload this page, we see down here, why is it?
Oh, I have a persist.
Oh my God. All right, so ignoring this stuff from the previous reload, but every time I reload, you'll see another ready, because when the document is ready, it's supposed to console.log that.
And there are advanced debugging tools that allow you to go through line by line and make breakpoints and pause your code. But sometimes when I'm just, kind of frustrated, I want to figure out which line isn't working, I'll put console.log 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll try to figure out which ones aren't showing up, to figure out which blocks of my code aren't being run.
Why do we actually not need to do JCP for this? It's not on a server, right? Do they have cores or?
So I literally have no idea, and I wanted to ask David that. So basically there's 3 things you're going to need to be AJAXing for the P set. 2 of them, you need to do JSON-P. I could not figure out why this one I did not need to. So it's obviously something, but I'm just going to ask. I'll get back to you. I'll post it on the forum. Yeah, there'll be, we can break now. It's 8.
Sure.
We can break. Or you can continue, whatever you want.
Yeah. We promise we will not progress further with our example solution in the next 7 minutes. Yeah. So feel free to stretch your legs. We'll both be floating now.
Actually, I said it right now.
What?
I'm gonna look up why.
Okay. But is your computer technically is broadcasting this out? So
let's first see whether this is returning what I want it to be returning. So
in the network tab,
I'm hoping that this returns some stuff that, like, the geocode API says what the return stuff looks like. But let's just see if that's what I'm getting.
Address 10.251.76.
So
on your phone. Let me try it out.
And let's try that. That doesn't help.
Sorry, my phone's kind of slow.
So 02138, submit. And now, since I console.logged over here,
you can also, once you install Xcode,
the stuff that got returned, that's what I should be seeing down here.
I have Xcode.
And it is.
Okay, so
I'll see that.
I'll see if this works.
I can click on this to, like, expand the object. And inside of the object, we have a results array. Inside of that, we have this guy. So I'm going to, for simplicity, I'm just going to copy and paste. I won't copy and paste just Cambridge MA into the div. I'll copy and paste this whole thing. We could go further and, like, parse it, but
the username?
let's just do this. Or you could go into the address components and
Chrome, what do you
actually
go to view the files?
we'll do that.
Oh, I see.
All right, so you can also use this just to, like, see what the object actually looks like. So now I know that
but actually, it's more important. So
in data,
in Chrome, what URL do you go to see the file?
data is going to have,
Like when you see the one you're running?
we have data.results, which is going to be an array.
God. Like,
And Inside of results, we only care about the first thing in the array. So this is how you traverse objects, is the dot notation. And results is an array. We just want the first thing in that array. I keep clean. And so inside of here, now we're going to want to traverse address components because we want to find
And
first,
have you been doing it test HTML? Which file should I just?
we want to find Massachusetts, which is apparently the political
So no.
type. And we want to find
Actually, I could just
Cambridge,
Yeah.
which is locality.
'Cause
Oh,
it's-
so locality and
I don't know which one.
administrative area level 1 are what we're looking for.
body, just throw like an
Okay,
I
so
forget how MAMP works.
what I just said might have been confusing, but
My map isn't even running right now, actually.
That would. Yeah. That also.
data dot results 0 dot address components is an array of these address components that contains like Cambridge, MA, 02138, USA. And so in those address components, we specifically want to find Cambridge and
So your
MA.
MAMP is. so
And
localhost is
we
a
can find
shortcut
those by
for
looking at the
your
types
max
specified in these
your
components,
max IP address.
where 02138 has the type postal code, which is not surprising.
So it's broadcasting not on.
And Cambridge has
not
the
on
type
public
locality,
network,
which is
on
a
the
little
private
less
network, so my
intuitive.
phone's on the same IP.
And Massachusetts has
Or sorry,
administrative
yeah,
area
some
level
routers
1,
is-
which is impossible.
And
So-
I guess the firewall isn't blocking it.
The two things we are looking for
But yeah.
are city.
So you just type it in.
I'll specify them
As long as it's on the
here
open network.
Wow, so it's really going.
Yeah.
as just like initializing them to nothing. State equals null. So now we want to traverse this array.
So if you guys see the code. No double quote, no single quotes around data. For one.
And
No double quotes, just no
as
quotes.
a
Data is the
thing
same
I'm going to go
variable.
over in a bit,
And
you might also sometimes see
and now yeah. And
this sort of syntax. So,
this code
Do
that
not
here
use
is
this
missing.
syntax on arrays. This syntax is exclusively for
No, so above here we had
objects. So iterating over objects is this syntax.
Document on ready.
The fact that there's two different for loops is why
you have the
a lot
first
of
picture
libraries
still?
have things like an each
So,
function, which
these two
iterates over
lines.
objects or arrays blindly. But this is the syntax you want to use for arrays,
So then
which is probably similar to other programming languages you've ever
Yeah.
used. Okay, so as a shorthand, I'm going to just say that.
Oh,
And so now
23 is complaining about.
This is where I tend to over console log, where like let's make sure things are working where we want them to be. So I'm just
it's
going to
the other
log
way around,
what the
curly
component
and then
actually
paren.
is.
So
And
this
coming back
curly for
to
that
here.
curly and this paren for that paren.
Refresh.
And
02138.
23.
So we see 4 things were logged,
oh, sorry. So that
where they're all
only one of these
objects,
two.
and
I didn't see
inside of those objects are all these things. So in each of those objects, we want to look in the types to see if it has one of the
something
types
isn't
we're looking
closed.
for.
So
We
we
were
just
looking
look at
for
it.
specifically. I'm going to need to
working?
copy these.
So something's not closed. So
So
Scroll down.
locality.
so this closes that. This closes this. This closes this. This closes that. And we need one more
And
for this and this.
administrative area level 1.
One more set of these. Yeah. Of both. Oops, sorry.
So
And the return false is probably going to end up inside.
there are
of the,
a couple of different ways you could do
inside
this,
of the one.
but how I'm going to do it is if
Actually, return
inside
false would
inside of
be inside of the
comp.types.
submit one, so it's inside of that one.
So we want to look inside of comp.types and see if either of these locality or administrative area level 1 is inside of that array.
Yeah.
And so to do that, I'm going to do
Nice.
dot
That's
index of locality.
Thank you.
And so if that returns -1, if it returns -1, that means that locality locality is not inside of that type array. If it returns anything else, it's going to return the index of that string. And so if it returned the index of the string, that means that it is of the correct type. So here, if it does not equal or if it doesn't equal -1, then, oh my God. then this component represents the locality, which is Cambridge, I think. So now we want to store inside of city city equals comp dot long name. And I can look back here in case I forgot what it actually is, but yeah, it's if the type, if locality is inside of this array, then I want to short either long name or short name, it doesn't matter. Else, if comp.types.index of this guy does not equal -1, this means I found the state. And so I'm going to store inside of state comp dot, and just so it's MA instead of Massachusetts, I'll store short name. Okay. And now after this for loop, I'm just going to do a sanity check where if city is still null or state is still null, that means that I was not able to find a city or state for this, for the zip code that you entered, and things have gone wrong. I don't know what we'll do. Alert, uh-oh. There's going to be another alert, uh-oh, we'll need. But alert, uh-oh, and return. Okay. Else, now we have our city and state. So these guys are going to need to go inside of, it's hard with all this text, but notice we're still inside of this getJSON function. So after we have retrieved this data, inside of this, we're going to want to find the city and state. And now we still need to insert the city and state into our div, which is exactly what we did before. Well, it's just this. And the text is going to be city plus, comma, plus state. Okay, so questions on what we just did? And again, we'll put these online with comments on exactly what everything is for. So index of, if I give you, well, we can run it in the console. And let's see. So let's say I have this array, 1, 2, let's do var array equals 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is what our array looks like. Inside of this array, if I do arr.index of 2, it's going to return 1. Because 1 is the index of the value 2. And index of 4 will return 3. But if I do index of 5, it's going to return -1 because it was not found in that array. So I'm using index of to see if locality or administrative area level 1 are inside of the types array that I'm currently searching through. And let's run this. I'll probably get some sort of errors. Boom. Woo! Unexpected. And this is stuff that you will be doing for the project. It's unfortunate. I find the iterating through those address components things tedious, but Google just kind of returns everything at you, and you have to put it together however you want it to be.
Is it okay to use underscore JS something like that?
So you're free, well, the spec currently says that you have to email us about any libraries you want to use. So do that. Underscore is fine if you want to use underscore.
For those unfamiliar, underscore is a library like jQuery that just gives you access to more functions and some functions that are handy.
Yeah. underscore can be useful in this project.
Yeah.
But if you don't know jQuery, then don't overwhelm yourself with libraries. Just use jQuery and get used to that.
This is the data in the loop. Can you still access that all of the loop?
If you save it,
Like say you define the city within the for loop, can you still get the city out?
yes. So in JavaScript, unlike in C or other languages, there is no notion of variable scoping. There is some notion, but there's basically only like global scope and function scope. So in JavaScript, if I define a variable inside of, not inside of here, inside of here, say blah equals hello, then blah will still be accessible down here if it happened to be defined inside of that if. So like in C, since it's defined in that set of curly braces, it would not be available outside of that set of curly braces. That's not true of JavaScript, which means what I did up here with setting city equal to null and state equal to null, I could also have just not said that at all. And so what that means is city is going to be set in here, and state will be set in here. And down here, I can say if, and you saw this in lecture, but if type of city is undefined or type of state is undefined. So what this is just saying is if those variables have not been defined, that means we got through this whole for loop without hitting the lines var city equals whatever and var state equals whatever, which means that we did not find a city or state, and we should alert the same uh-oh. So this is this pattern type of variable equals undefined is your way of checking to see if the variable exists.
So for those still working on this one, keep working on it. We'll float around. For those who have finished this one, something else you may want to try is instead of the address field, the geolocating API allows you to pass in a latitude and a longitude. So LAT LNG would be, instead of address, LAT LNG equals. And then then the latitude comma the longitude. So I give that a try with some made-up numbers or numbers you get from Google Maps. And when that works, try using your current location. The way you can access your current location is through a cool JavaScript thing called geolocation, used by navigator.geolocate. It takes a few callbacks like getJSON did, but I Google around a bit, take a look at some documentation, and see if you can figure out how the navigator.geolocate function works in JavaScript. As a hint, it'll give you a latitude and longitude, and you'll probably want to send that along to Google. But try just getting your current latitude and longitude using navigator.getJSON. Navigator.geolocate.
That says get current location, that button.
And the easiest way to try it out, write in your console. So if you open up a console and type in navigator.geolocate, and then pass in whatever you're supposed to pass in, it should work for you. .geolocation, not geolocate. Well, do it without that, so as an example. So if you type in the console navigator.geolocation, the console tells us it has two functions inside of it. Get current position, or three functions, watch position and clear watch. We don't really care about the last two, but we're going to want to use this get current position function. And no arguments, for a single example. Yeah. So no arguments is not the right way to call this function. It does take one or more arguments. Their callback functions are a lot like getJSON. If you try it without them, it'll tell you that you're wrong. But not to give what an example callback would be. But if you look it up, it'll tell you what kind of function or what kind of argument it's expecting. And my bottom left corner does that, Rob.
This is provided from the browser or the navigator object?
Yes. So it's an HTML5 thing that in newer browsers, they have a navigator object that has this geolocation ability.
In the same way that you have a document object or a window object. It just comes kind of built in.
I hate W3 scroll.
What are you trying to do?
Go back, and it wasn't. You don't have natural scrolling.
Correct.
So I looked up on developer.mozilla.org. That happened to be the first link. That tends to be a pretty good site for documentation. And here you'll see that this is how we're going to call it. It has 3 parameters: success, errors, and options. So the only one you need to specify here is success. But remember in the problem set that there should be absolutely no way for us to trigger absolutely any errors in your console, meaning like you should never get any red warnings down here, in here. So you are probably in your project, you're going to want to specify an error function that's going to handle errors appropriately. If you don't specify that function, then we're going to get, whenever something goes wrong, we'll get red text in your console.
So can you click?
So a quick callback to the previous exercise we just did before we got into the geolocation stuff.
So it actually doesn't know.
An error that we did not consider that I had meant to is what if I enter something that is an invalid zip code? So even if it's just like a set of 5 numbers that isn't a real zip code or Google doesn't have any information about it. So this is something where Google happens to say that it'll return something like its data.status will be like 0 results or something. So
What do we make?
if that is the case, this is just another error scenario you need to watch out for. So another alert, uh-oh, or whatever. Because if you don't look out for this, then I should do that.
That's easiest thing.
Right
First
here.
line, you do console.log.
If you don't look out for this, then here when you say var components equal data.results 0, there will not be a results 0 because that array will be empty. So
Yeah.
you need to be making sure that everything
We'll try to figure
is
out.
valid so that you don't get any of these errors.
And I think you probably have the same issue
And
as well.
for the
Yeah, no.
last, or the
Oh, sorry.
recent exercise, now back to geolocation stuff. So what I've changed so far is, like up there, I've changed the top thing to be from like a text field to just a button
Notice that it found it.
that says use current location.
Didn't actually change it.
And now, since I'm using a
you-
button all the way up here, what we used to have as on submit, since we're no longer submitting a form, we're just clicking a button. Now I'm using a different event handler. So the event now isn't submit, it's click. So when we click this button, we're going to want to do our thing. And I've started with using get current position. The success function is going to take the position, and then we need to do things with that position. And over in your console is an easy way, all right? Navigator dot geolocation dot get current position function position console.log position.
There you go.
Okay, so I did this just to see what the object looks like that this is returning. And so I can look in here and I see that there's a timestamp field and a coords field. And inside of coords, there is a latitude and longitude. So I'm going to directly use those.
My guess is that.
And I can say
Oh, they're calling that a sub.
this is unnecessary, but the latitude is position dot coords dot latitude
So the way we said it.
the longitude.
Interesting.
is position dot coords dot longitude. And now inside of our URL, we no longer want to use
But then Cambridge
Google's,
probably break, 'cause Cambridge
before
doesn't have
this
a
was
sub-locality.
address and we used a zip code. Now we want to use a lat long,
It's like
and you can see this just in
2,
Google's
3, 8.
on the API
I think
page.
it'll-
It says you
oh,
can
okay,
use
no, I
latitude and
find
longitude.
sub-locality. Yep.
And I'll do lat plus, comma separating them, plus long. So now we're using that. And let's see what the object looks like that it's returning.
Oh, sorry.
So, refresh. Nope. Exercise 3. Okay. Use current location. You see the object. It's an array of length 9. So we have 9 different objects in here. I am still using the first one, which we see contains literally the entire address. So 52 Oxford Street, Harvard University, Cambridge, MA 02138. The rest of these objects as we go, down, we'll see that this says United States, this one says Massachusetts, USA, and United States, some sequence of characters, Middlesex, MA, USA. So as we go down this results array, we get like more and more general areas along with some different languages or something. So the top one is good enough for us because we're still iterating over these address components looking for locality and administrative area level 1. So we really didn't need to change anything else to get this working because all of this stuff from when we were using zip code still applies. We're just now using Latin long.
But if you have like a search field and you want to populate it with a button click, then you have to reverse encode and populate it.
Yes.
Fun fact. Manhattan's a sublocality. So it's New York, New York, unless you do. Things I've learned by floating. So if I could have everyone's attention for a little bit, I'm going to introduce what will be our next exercise. But if you want to keep working on the previous one, or the previous two, wherever you are, that's totally fine. And I'll keep floating and helping with anything. Or if you want to put those aside and move on to this one, that's also totally fine. But in the interest of making sure we cover all the topics you'll need for the project, I'll just introduce this next one. So we're actually going to go back to some of the HTML from the very first exercise, just a text box and a button and a div. If you deleted that or extended that, it shouldn't be too much to make a new one with, again, text box, button, div. The goal here is to play with local storage and make it so that when you enter a word and hit submit, it'll add to this list. So the first thing I would do is modify our exercise 1 code from replacing to adding. And instead of just fully replacing the HTML there, you're going to want to get the HTML that's already there, add to it, and put it back. That shouldn't be too much of a change from exercise 1. With local storage, however, we want to make it so that when you refresh the page or close the browser and come back, the list stays. Think of this as like a to-do list of words that I want to remember. So first, get your exercise 1. For those that are going to do this exercise, get the very first thing we did up and running again, and now have it add instead of just fully replacing. And then play with local storage, whereby you can set, where you can save items in local storage. So yeah, again, feel free to work on any of the exercises we've been talking about. We did just email out the sort of solution set or the draft of the solution set for the previous ones, so feel free to do whichever exercise you like. And if you're looking for a tutorial on local storage, a quick Google search should bring up the methods you can use to put things in local storage and pull them back out again. Yeah, Rob just reminded me that jQuery has an append function that will add on to the content in a div. So if this div was called text, $#text.append world would put world after whatever's inside of there. So no need to get what's in there, remember it, add to it, put it right back. $, a selector, and then .append will allow you to add things to the contents of a div.
So from the exercise1.html that was sent out, this is literally the only change so far.
He's changing text to append for those with vision closer to mine. Can you go back?
Okay, so the objective here is that like after I refresh this page,
So
all
you're
of
doing
these
this
highs
check
would stay here.
On every loop.
But as of right now, obviously if I refresh, they're gone.
Part of our loop.
So as a teaser, we have this local storage object in HTML5 compliant browsers.
It's the return that's stopping.
And
But you really want
ignoring what's already in that object that apparently RJ put in there or something.
That's fine.
You'll notice,
although the alert
like,
really should only happen when there's been a
if
problem.
I do local storage dot foo equals bar,
You'll see an alert.
now if I refresh the page,
The next one will happen.
and that refresh the page,
So, and you want
and
the
look
alert-
inside
you
of
want the
local
alert to be
storage,
it's
we see that
after
foo is still
going through
there.
All of them.
So
There's no
this
CDR
local
access.
storage object persists beyond the refresh of a page.
Or it's
And so you can
double
store things
bar
in that
or
for subsequent visits to a page. And you'll probably
Both
want to
work,
be storing
but
whatever is
to
inside of this
add
div
bar
in that
there,
local
yeah,
storage
shift
object
that.
somewhere.
Okay, cool. And syntax hiding again points out that
So I want to copy this out of to.
And for reference, this is a pretty common thing in jQuery, where like here, if I say, let's see, if I say,
and we'll have instructions on the website soon to
if I say
how to
exercise
do,
4
like, a site folder where
div.text
it's easier to find. So now
hello,
this one should-
this would insert into exercise 4 div
Oh,
the
yeah,
text
I see
hello.
that.
It would make the text inside of this div hello. But if instead I use the .text
Line
method
23
with no
is
argument,
a-
that retrieves the text that is inside of that div. Okay, so I'm just gonna pick, you can pick whatever name you want to store inside of local storage. You can pick whatever the key you want to call it. I'm going to call it div text.
In there.
So local storage.divtext equals all
It
text.
doesn't know. It doesn't really know
Okay.
about it.
So
Easiest way to. deal with this
now,
is just delete
what have I
functions,
forgotten
right?
to do
Delete
/
functions
why
geolocate.
won't this entirely
Delete
work yet?
function geolocate and delete. I guess that.
Yes, and that's
Make sure it lines.
fine. Well,
So now.
so the alternative to
instead
doing
of
this is like,
calling this geolocate.
So it's kind of
on
like
submit does geolocate now. On
if
submit does this,
my div currently
what do you want
says
to happen?
hello world dog or hello world cat, then my local storage.divtext also says hello world cat. And then if I proceed to add dog, I am completely overwriting what is currently inside of local storage.divtext. Instead, I could just append to it dog. So that is an alternative. But still, if I, this
Okay.
at least succeeds
Oh, I was
in,
just gonna-
now if I say local storage dot divtext, I see all that.
So just make sure everything's
But
happening.
what is
Do
the
console.log
issue?
with double quotes like hello or the number 1 or just anything really.
So I'm actually wondering if that's going to be the case. Ignoring that for now.
Uh,
Oh,
Below.
I know why that will be the case. Ignoring that for now.
High 2 or inside the curly braces.
Why does it not currently remember what was in like local storage? It's remembering it, but it should reappear in this div. Why is it not reappearing in the div?
And save. Let's give this one a try.
Because I'm never actually I'm just I'm updating
So
local
notice
storage
it's there,
divtext
it's
whenever
fixed.
there's something added to it, but I'm never.
Forgetting to return false.
Yeah, I'm not like putting. When I refresh the page, I need to insert that text into the div.
I believe so. It's going to be the last thing
So
that happens in the submit.
I want to do
handler.
that
Oh, actually, it's
probably.
So this
on
one
ready.
closes this one. This one closes the submit handler.
All right,
so it's
there's
gonna
a
be
couple
above
things
that.
that- okay,
The last thing that happens
so-
in the submit handler.
When the document loads, I want to insert into our exercise 4 div
So this is the position thing. Notice that there's
I want
only
to give it
timestamp and chords. There's
the
no
text.
city or state. And so city and state
Uh,
are coming out undefined.
and what is okay. Well,
But you can use
var the text we want
you go
is
little button.
local storage
the
dot
little button next to chords.
div text,
So that's what we have access to.
and I could insert that directly in there, but
So it's position.
let's see what this does.
Dot chords dot latitude and position dot chords dot longitude.
So,
are the two
It
things we
correctly
have access
inserts the text into the div. Notice if I insert something, let's do other letters.
to. Chords, I think with a D for coordinates. Chorus is weird.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so notice that they're going on separate lines, and that's correct because I put a BR tag here, line break. But if I refresh, it all ends up on the same line. And that's because with jQuery, you have to be careful of what functions you use. So there's text, and there is
You'd have to send that to the
HTML.
to
So
the
text
Google.
grabs literally only the text
Google
inside of the
has a
div.
thing instead of
HTML will
address,
also grab all of the relevant
LAT,
tags and
LNG,
things.
lat long.
So
And
it
then
was
it would give you
ignoring the
back the same
BR tags when I was
2 or 3
using
steps
text,
more.
but now we're using HTML. So something is still wrong. Let's see what it is. Or refresh first.
Excuse me.
Refresh. So now we see that all the BR tags are literally in the code. And that's because of this text up here, because we want this to also be HTML. So when we said text, it was taking the HTML characters literally. Like, I wanted a less than sign right here. Whereas when we say HTML, it interprets the less than sign as the beginning of an HTML tag. And there's one last thing that we want to do. And that is going to be, so a frequent issue with local storage when you're working with it. So,
This is
oh,
data.
and this looks good now. And as we add things,
Data.result
refresh,
is
and it's
this.
there. So
thing.
frequent issue
Data.result
is like, all right, now we want to start over. So
So it's from here down.
this
is data.result.
works for any associative array, any
This is
object, and this is
data.result
also true of
all the way
local
down.
storage. So to do that,
This
we can
is
just type in our
address number,
console,
which is an
delete
array
local storage dot div text,
Parts. So
and so
notice
now
they
it
broke
no
the
longer
address
exists
down
again.
into a number, a root,
But
a
what is going to
locality,
happen when I
a
refresh?
city, or an administrative area local.
Not what I was
And
expecting.
So we're going
to-
through looking
Bleh.
for
Maybe that were
administrative area level 1, which is going to be the state, and locality, which is the city.
So this is probably
How do you know this is zero? Like,
fighting
is this
me.
like a whole array or like,
So the
All right,
first
so
result is from
I was hoping it would yell at me,
Um,
but it's not. It will yell at you depending on. So the issue here is local storage.div text is not
I'll
defined.
just show you an example.
And so
If I do
here, when we say var text equals local storage.div text, text is undefined. Which just happens to work out because inside of here, when we just say HTML undefined, it's just not going to put anything. The right way of doing this, and in the project, you're almost assuredly going to want to do this because you're going to need to work local storage a bit differently, is to first say if, and this is what we did before,
I'm just
with
saying
if
quick
local storage.div text is not undefined,
to this URL,
then we'll do this
and
stuff
I'm gonna log it out.
of
So this is the
actually
result.
inserting it into the DOM.
So here you can
And this is the
create all
exact same
parts, so
type
the
of stuff we did
results
before
array,
where like,
it happens
is this
where one
variable
thing-
actually defined? If so, then we'll actually
so
use it
when
and
it's
insert
at
it.
zero, there's
If it's not,
things that
then
are
avoid any possible errors that might happen if we
Maybe
try
not-
to
so
use it
this
as if it
very
is,
specific.
as if it does
purpose.
exist.
Now, a more general one,
Questions on that?
like a street, like 10 Main Street, might give you 10 results or something for different states and states. So result 0 is the first result that Google gives
So
back, and then we
if
do
local
a
storage is
large
what?
First result.
Yes.
So
So
zero
I was actually going to
or is it
ask David this, but
It's-
the answer is yes for any application you really make.
Result 0 is
Uh,
an object.
Remember local storage and also our navigator.geolocation stuff? All of that is like HTML5. It's very new. It's if you go back to IE6 or even like early Chrome and all this stuff, you will not have those things. And so these will cause errors if you go into earlier browsers. So technically we should do something like if type of local storage does not equal undefined, that means we are in a HTML5 compliant browser that has local storage support. Then we can do this stuff. And that's, I don't have it in this, but same thing with the navigator stuff. If navigator does not equal undefined, then use navigator.geolocation.getCurrent position. That is the right way of making any app. Although, if your app is using a bunch of other features that your website will basically be broken if it doesn't support local storage, then usually what happens
Can you scroll up a bit?
if type of local storage doesn't or
A little more?
is actually undefined, alert, get a newer browser or
It's just something
something.
that the Google API wants to know.
which a lot of websites actually do. Or a lot of websites will say like turn on JavaScript
or
and
false.
stuff like that.
Can you swingify parse to JSON in there? Or?
25 bars?
No, swingify parse.
Oh, yeah. So this is what would have been exercise 5, but now there's 15 minutes. So local storage only stores strings. And you will notice in the, well, I guess technically you don't have to, but if you want to store an array or an object inside of local storage, then you'll need to store them as strings. One way of doing that is this convenient, so using it in the console, we have json.parse and json.stringify. So what json.stringify does is, let's say we have some array, then json.stringify of that array will return a string version of that array. And, or let's say string equals x. And then if we json.parse that string, it will return the original array that we had. So inside of local storage, let's say local storage dot array equals x. So when we refresh this page and look at local storage dot x, it's undefined, or we did not call it that array. It shows this string 1, 2, 3, 4, which is not a valid array. And so the way we want to store it is local storage dot array equals json.stringify the array 1, 2, 3, 4. Now when we refresh the page
Can you zoom, Rob?
and look at local storage dot array, we see it's an appropriate array form, but it's still a string, and so we can json.parse. And so we're just showing these functions to you so that you know they're available. You're probably going to want to use them in the project. Remember, local storage cannot store objects or arrays. So if you want to store them, you need to first stringify it and store it in local storage. And then when you want to retrieve it, you need to parse the JSON. Questions?
Yeah, so those are the exercises we had for the last 10 minutes. It'll be more free-form open question and answer. We'll still continue to float around. And definitely, if you have any questions on the problems you've been doing, the example solutions, your own solutions, feel free to ask us right now or reach out to us via email or to really post to discuss where we can discuss them as a group.
And again, tonight we'll write up like nice commented versions of the things I just sent out to you.
So yeah, we'll just continue to float.
Just to point out the syntax,
So for each time through this loop, all
local
of this
storage
applies to one of these.
dot foo is exactly the same as local storage
If it's got a locality,
bracket
got administrative.
So,
foo.
so see how there's this types array
So
inside?
this any
This
object you can
types
reference
array has
things in
locality.
either way.
And the types array.
The exception being you can't say like dot
And check this types array.
dot tilde
This
or
is the
something,
neighborhood.
but you can say
Check
this.
this. Check this. This is the locality console.log data.
It's over.